Yes. Well, thank God I ate that horrible contumely. I have energy. Yes. So I have enough energy to answer all your questions. So let's begin. How is it done? I know this is going to go all over the place because the questions came all over. But how is it done? You and I. Yes, psychotherapist, patient, one-to-one. Okay, but that's not it. Couples. Your partner, your business partner has betrayed you. We can do. Your wife, your husband, your girlfriend, we can do. Your children, we can do. You are a bad parent, maybe not, but your children are too difficult to handle. We can do parenting in psychotherapy. So we can do individuals, groups, couples, even corporations, we can do. Yeah? So that's psychotherapy. Okay. As if that was not confusing enough, who does it? As in, on the therapist side, right? Okay. We would like to say that people who are trained to do psychotherapy. So, for clinical psychologists, we would say they have to have a master's to be called clinical psychologists. Or to be called a psychologist in anything, you have to have a master's in Ghana. A master's, yes. So, so you can be a clinical psychologist and do therapy. And clinical psychologists will be doing therapy for psychopathology, mainly. So, depression, anxiety, or helping people with schizophrenia, helping their families cope, or running social skills training for people with psychosis. Why? Because when did you learn how to date? How old? 16, 17. That's when you were 18, you were learning how to date. But right. But at 16, 17, 18, my young schizophrenics are getting psychotic. They are withdrawing. They don't know how to date. So by the time the acute stages of psychosis has passed, they don't know how to say hello to a girl. You know, so we do teach social skills. Or in their families, nobody respects them. So when they stand up to talk, you say, oh, be quiet. You know, that sick man, oh, please. So they should be able to be assertive and say, sometimes I'm ill. This time, I'm not ill. And I can tell that what you are saying is not correct. So we have to teach them assertiveness. You know, so we do social skills training for even people with depression, anxiety, and so forth. So we call it social skills training. It's part of psychotherapy. So have I answered the question? Who does it? Clinical psychologists do it for psychopathology. School counselors do it with parents. If there's a child that's getting delinquent or a child who has learning difficulties, school counselors will sit with their child, counsel them, support them. If their parents are going through a divorce, whatever, school counselors are there for the child. In rape, in all kinds of bad turbulence, school counselors are there. But they can also do that therapy with the parents to help the parents understand what's going on. Or to pull the ears of negligent parents or report them to the police. So part of what they have to do, school counselors. Or guidance and counseling for professional workplaces. So we should have them in, say, the Ghana Health Service, pulling you in when you are drinking too much, or you are shouting at your patients, or you are not getting to work on time, or you are not dealing well with your team members. the guidance and counselor should be there for you. Or you can be proactive and say to the guidance counselor, you see, right now I'm specializing in family medicine, but in 10 years I want to be a surgeon. What shall I do? The guidance counselor will say, you know, maybe we should do it the other way around. Be the surgeon now, and then go and be the family physician in 10 years, because maybe your hands will be shaking and all of that. So something, I don't know. But those are the kinds of things they can, a guidance and counseling person can do. So in a nutshell, who does it? Who is qualified in that domain to do it? And it can be a family medicine person who has learned bedside manners, knows the ethics of the profession, and knows how to talk to patients, you know, eyeball to eyeball, with kind words rather than with harsh words. Who knows about the medicine, and who knows about the illness, and who knows what lies ahead, so that they are working with their patient every step of the way. Sounds to me like you guys do therapy and counseling all the time. Does that answer the question? Okay. So you just need a little bit of tweaking during your training. So you go to a higher level, as with motivated interviewing, for example. So when you're asking the questions, hey, did you go and drink again last night? Oh, no, doctor. No. Meanwhile, he's smelling of alcohol. So instead of that, you can begin the conversation like, oh, boss, things seem rough today. What's going on? Did she slap you again? Something like that. Then you have begun the conversation on a different level. So those are like different techniques for psychotherapy that will help your work go much better. Okay, so have I answered the question? Who does it? It's not a straightforward answer, but it does give you some. What are the indications for psychotherapy? As in, when do you refer? When do you refer? Oh, when the person is, when anybody is in psychic pain, immediately refer. When you see they are suffering, even if they are on medication, refer for psychotherapy. You know, if there's human emotional suffering, you know, human pain is worse than physical pain. The way that my patients describe to me, that they are in pain, especially people who want to end it. I am in so much pain, I want to die. That's some serious pain, man. You know? Just refer. Just refer. Because the human counseling, human touch, sometimes does great things, wonderful things for people, gives people the reason to go on. There are some very famous cases before several, what's the word? The highest courts of the land, the Supreme Courts of various US states, where people have fought for the right to die, you know, because two people particularly who were completely quadriplegic and just wanted to die. They fought for the right to die. And they went all the way to the Supreme Courts of their states. And finally, they wore down their Supreme Courts to the point where they were given the right to die and to choose the way they wanted to die. And then, by the time this became public, some, you know, philanthropic groups had gotten to them, showed them a lot of love, support, and even though they gained the right to die, they never used it. Yeah. So there's a lot that can be done with the, you know, human caring, human touch, psychotherapy, counseling. What are the indications? I said human suffering, right? Okay. I will be more specific in a minute. What are its limitations? like everything else, psychotherapy has its limitations. But question is, there are 101 different kinds of therapy, of psychotherapy. There's not one psychotherapy. So it's not a question of, what's the question? What are its limitations? It's a question of what kind of psychotherapy for what kind of human problem. So they're like, for example, depression is best treated with cognitive behavior therapy. That the two go very well together. It's the highest efficiency we have for mood disorders is with cognitive behavior therapy. For long-term personality disorders, you may have more of an emphasis on psychoanalysis with some behavior therapy thrown in. So it depends on what the problem is, how long it has been there for, and therefore the different tools that you use for it, different kind of psychotherapy. Okay, so those, so the limitations are that you will find a therapist for that particular problem. And it's difficult because we don't have many, not here in Ghana, not in the UK, not in the US, not enough therapists all around. So that's the difficulty. You may have a general therapist, but for that problem, you may need someone who's more skilled for that particular problem. And so then you have a limitation right there. They can only take your patient so far. For example, my patient is really afraid of flying. No amount of talking about flying will allow that person to go on the flight. Behavior therapists will say, unless you expose that person to the flight, or you change the way they think about the flight, or you do something we call systematic desensitization. So there are very specific things for specific, yes, difficulties like that. Okay, now next question. What is psychotherapy? Talk therapy. That's psychotherapy. Talk. Okay, so we have psychopharmacology, which is medication for psychiatric problems and psychiatry. Then we have talk therapy, and then we have ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, and we have now brain cranial stimulation, all kinds of strange things. But psychotherapy is our mainly. But don't worry, we use, it's not just talking, no, it's not just talking. But it's called talk therapy. Talk, yes. It's not just talking, no, just like that, you just go and sit there and talk. We'll come to that. The advantages and disadvantages, we sort of talked about it with regards to the skill. Learning, it takes years to learn to be, what do you call it, like a psychoanalyst. A psychoanalyst is years and years of school, and then yourself going through analysis. You know, so it's difficult. Like it takes a long time to train a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist. I went to school for 6 years after my first degree, before I got my PhD and could call myself a clinical psychologist. You know, it takes too long. I mean, for you guys too, I know. 6 years of medical school and then specialization, 4 years, and then whatnots and whatnots. That's the same thing with psychotherapy. But some of them are, we can like do some task sharing. So we can take my colleague Vikram Patel in India. He's a psychiatrist. He does all his randomized control trials in psychology. We're opposite. I'm a psychologist. I do mine in medicine. He does his in therapy. But he takes young, voluntary workers, health workers, like health visitors. He'll take them, he'll teach them one module in CBT. He'll say, do this. And maybe it's like, that one module is like 3 different sessions of psychotherapy. They learn it using the manual. They take the manual with them to the field and they do it. And it works. It works. So you cut all the years of, it doesn't mean you don't need a psychologist. You need a psychologist to develop the module. But once it's developed, you teach it step by step to the health worker. They can do it. So we're trying that with people we call psycho. They finished 4 years of university. They finished 4 years of psychology. And then we pair them with community psychiatric nurses. And so they can provide some psych first aid. And over time, I think we'll develop the modules a bit more. So we can shortcut and do task sharing. Okay. The advantages and disadvantages. Okay, I think we sort of touched on that. Okay. These questions are all like master's thesis you've asked me. Differences between psych and hypnotism. Okay, psychotherapy is talk therapy. Hypnotism is taking somebody to the point where you break down resistance and you can make suggestions to them. And it goes straight into their subconscious. Yes, so that's very different. In psychotherapy, you allow the person their will to say no to what you're saying. In hypnotherapy, you circumvent their being able to say no and go straight into their subconscious. So I haven't done enough reading into hypnotherapy to know how effective it is. But my professor, Jack Brackman, he was like, if he could say, because he was South African, he couldn't say it. But if he could say it, he would have said it. I didn't believe in hypnotherapy. Yeah. Okay. But I'm sure it has its uses. And there's a little bit of that in what's it called? Eye movement. It's not sleep. It's eye movement directed something. EMDR, I think it is called. But what it is, especially for trauma, you build a fear hierarchy. And ask the person, so the person tells you the things that they're afraid of in the hierarchical form. You start from the lowest. And you get them to imagine what it is on that lowest fear level. And as they're imagining it, they're following your fingers across. And just the eye movement like that seems to bring down the fear. Yeah. So that's one of, we would add that to psychotherapy. It's not all talk, but yeah. They have to concentrate and move their eyes to follow what you're doing. Yes. And so I don't know what it does to the brain, but it does reduce the anxiety. We don't know why it works, but it seems to work. And I don't even know how they found that out. Okay. Now, the main principles of psychotherapy. What are the main principles of psychotherapy? Now, this you need to know. Psychotherapy like we said, it's not just talk. It's talk, but it's not just talk. It comes from theory, a theory of psychopathology. So we'll do that in a minute. Okay. Comes from a theory of psychopathology. So if your theory, okay, the causes of mental illness, if you believe that anxiety, for example, is caused by pairing a neutral stimulus with a feared stimulus. So let's say that when you see me, although you are happy, okay, or you don't have any feelings towards me, but one day you saw me, and then when you turned around, you saw a bad accident. You just said good morning to me, then you turn around and you see a bad accident. Terrible, terrible accident. The next time you see me, you get scared. You've paired my neutral self with a bad accident, and now when you see me, this woman is just bad luck. So now, if this is your theory of how people get anxious, now you have to have a way of reducing the anxiety by undoing this pairing. There's your theory of, that's how you then begin to develop your tools for getting rid of anxiety. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So it stems from theory, it's theory driven, and it's driven by your theory of psychopathology. Yeah? Okay. So the main principles will be the principles of the theory. Role of spirituality in psychotherapy. I think the other day, you can put it in whichever way you want. If your patient is very spiritual, then it would be foolish of you not to use their belief to help them. So you can bring it in. Yeah. So the other day, for example, I was asked by church to talk about CBT. And so I'll show it to you because you've asked this question, when we do behavior therapy, I'll show it to you. I'll show you that. Difficulties between counseling and differences between counseling and psychotherapy. I'd like to say that psychotherapy has to do with pathology. We are the ones who deal with sickness. And then counseling has to do with strengths, taking the person's strength and building it up. So taking them through, getting them ready for promotions or deciding what profession to do. And there's a whole science to it, that kind of stuff. They will assess and they will find your strength and they'll build your strength. And a big part of psychology now is called positive psychology. That has to do with strengths as well. So we are beginning to understand that, the 80% of people who live in the world, they could also use some counseling and guidance. And we don't have to just work with pathology. How to deal with betrayal and divorce in therapy. Oh, it's hard because in betrayal, the person who's betraying doesn't want to tell you that they are betrayed. That's the nature of it. It's not a betrayal if you know they are betraying you. So if you have people in therapy who are betraying, it's very difficult to get them to agree that they have indeed betrayed. But the person who feels betrayed may actually not have been betrayed. Why do I say that? The signs were probably always there that the partner was never going to be faithful. Okay, I'm making a big assumption here. But it's likely that one always knew that with this one, maybe I'm lucky to have him or her beside me, I'll take it like that. So when the betrayal comes, it's not a betrayal, it's not so strange. In divorce, there are two issues in divorce. One, in my philosophy, two people agree to marry. And two people must agree to divorce before there's a divorce. If the two do not agree, you cannot force. You cannot force a divorce. So in therapy, the question is it worth your while to stay when somebody wants to go? Is it worth your while? If it is not worth your while, what are you doing this for? I don't know. Those are murky areas. For me, I don't like dealing with it. I'm not very good with it. I have to be honest with you. You know, but I like to deal with it in such a way that if there are children involved, they are not hurt. So my whole deal in psychotherapy for divorcing parents is how do we bring the tempo down so that they can hear each other. It's not a judgment call on the therapist, but it's okay, you guys are adults, you're going in this way, you know how it's going to affect your children. How do you want to play it? Because even when you cut it, you still have to deal with each other for the children's sake. So is it worth your while? That's how I do that. Does that answer the question? It's okay. Yes, all right. We'll take it like that. And then scientific basis for therapy, it's the theory. And then the research. And the therapies that have the most research are the behavioral and the cognitive ones. Yeah. They have the most research. And goals of psychotherapy depends again on the kind of therapy. So we'll talk about it in a minute. Can I move forward with my presentation? Okay, good. You can always stop me and ask a question. Okay, so very quickly, psychotherapy is talk therapy. It emanates or comes from a theory of pathology that is about the beliefs of illness causation. So behavioral therapy comes from learning theory. It comes from learning theory. There are two main principles here that any behavior which is followed by a reward will tend to will be repeated. This is my favorite principle in life. My favorite psychological principle. I believe that if you want to be my friend and I make you happy near me, next time you come and be near me. It's a very simple principle. Okay. Let's see how it applies to children, for example. If a child behaves badly and you give the child a lot of attention, oh, Kofi, don't do that, come and sit by me. Next time, he'll do it again because it's been a wonderful experience. Kofi, stop that. One, stop that. Two, hey! Next time. So that's learning theory. That's one. Rewards, consequences. Another part of behavioral therapy is the association of two things, like I explained. Neutral plus fear object. Then the fear comes to be attached to the neutral object. So let's say, for example, panic, having a panic in a public vehicle, for example. Let's say that you were in a public vehicle, it had an accident. That's fearsome. So now you're afraid of public vehicles. Every time you go into a public vehicle, so that is how we learn fears. And behavior therapy is mostly about how we learn to be afraid. And so we can unlearn the fear. Cognitive therapy comes from cognitive theory, which is that the way you think affects the way you feel, basic principle. And CBT is around changing the way you think so that you can feel differently. Finished. Psychoanalysis. Freud is long, but because his theory is the beginning of modern psychotherapy, we'll go into it a little bit more. All right. So Sigmund Freud was from Vienna, Jewish man, repressed society. Nobody talked about sex in that society. Not like our music. Today I was listening to some hip life. I said, hey, this is what my children have been listening to. I say, he was Jewish. Freud, Austrian. Yes, but he was Jewish. He was from Jewish Viennese society. Yes, he was Austrian. Okay, so the basic concepts were those of the unconscious. A large part of our behavior is governed by ichumusum, is your unconscious. Things that you don't even tell yourself you think, which you think direct you. See that chick going, watch it, watch it. What are you thinking? That is what Freud says drives your behavior, your motivation. Okay, now psychic energy. We are born with a certain amount of energy. It doesn't leave us. It flows throughout our bodies. It starts with, when we are born, the sucking reflex. It goes to, oh God, I have to talk about these things. I will talk about them in a minute, but you see why I'm reluctant. So anyway, psychic energy is what drives our motivation, and it comes from our needs. Repression is some things are too fearful for us. For example, if some trauma happened in your childhood, say you were sexually abused as a child, it is too traumatic for you to think about even as an adult. But as a child, you repress it. And it goes out of your conscience. So you see children who come to school, they're smiling. They're able to work. They're able to, do everything. But you don't even know the kinds of suffering that they're suffering at home until they're in their early 20s, and all of this repression, they can't repress it anymore. They start having flashbacks, and they start being depressed, they start being suicidal. We bring them into therapy, and it opens a whole can of worms about being raped, or being abused, or being neglected, or being beaten by heart, So there's stuff that has happened in people's lives which they've managed to repress in order to move forward. And then now it's seeping out flashbacks, and you have to deal with it. Transference is an interesting one. Transference is when somebody is sitting in front of you and they're looking at you and you think they're in love with you. You lie. They're looking at, Freud will say they are behaving towards you as if you were some significant person from their lives. So, if they're seeing you as an authority figure, like a father, they behave towards you like a father, or a lover if they see you like that. But it is not for you to act on. It is for you to use, to bring into therapy the things from the past. To ask them if this is how they behave, for example, how it has worked for them, how it hasn't worked for them, if it is worth changing. It is not for you to say, hello baby, I like you too. So that when you do, you have actually Actually, Freud would say you have betrayed a trust. If you think that, if you use these things, these transference things, you've betrayed a trust. It isn't you. Your patient is vulnerable. Wake him up so he doesn't make the mistake. Wake him up. No, it's not him. I do not want you to date that beautiful girl that comes to sit in front of you. So that's why I'm waking you up. Okay, so you understand, you cannot date your patients. You can't. You can't. And there's a countertransference, which is the feelings that you have of your patients. Because they'll annoy you. They won't be compliant sometimes. The person, the blood pressure is going through the roof and he's not taking his medicine. Would you be annoyed? That's countertransference. Not supposed to be. You're supposed to say to your patient, do you know what? I'm upset that you're not taking your medicine. So I want to talk about me being upset rather than, sure, I can speak ever so. You know, instead of shouting on them, you have to let them know why you are upset, and you know, if they do things like that in their life when they know it's not good for them, those kinds of things. So that's countertransference. Developmental, then the theory is developmental. You have, oh, Freud. It just kills me to teach Freud. I'm sorry. Let's see. It's just such, I can't dodge Freud. It's such a strange theory too. Okay, so you see this, the 8 ego and superego. You know about the 8 ego and super, so I can skip it. I should. Okay, so you're born. Your instincts are in your head. First, you have to start, otherwise you will not get enough to eat, you will die. So that energy that drives you, that's your first psychic energy, the 8. And that, you know, it's not good or bad. There's nothing good or bad about it. It's just it, the 8. That's your first personality structure. Then, as you evolve, or even still as a child, you quickly learn the things that you should. You know, you want something, but you can't get it without punishment. So the ego develops. Okay, good. The ego develops to help you get what you need without being punished. And then later on, by 7, 8, the superego is developing to help you know what is right and what is wrong about your society. So that's the ego and the superego. These are the structures that drive you, that motivate you. Okay, so I'm going to, you will have to read a little bit more yourself, but I think this sort of gives you a good foundation to read from there. Psychopathology develops if the 8 ego and superego are not in balance. So if the 8 is stronger than the superego, then hey, any woman you see, you are going after. You don't care whether your wife will beat you, leave you, your children will leave you, that kind of thing. Then the ego is very weak. Now, if the superego is too strong, your conscience just doesn't allow you to take any step. You're guilty all the time. So the 3 structures must always be in balance. Otherwise, you have psychopathology, you have anxiety, and so forth. Yes. I think the 8 is closer to the instincts. Yes, the ego is what you do to avoid punishment, and the superego is conscience. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about transference, and then there are stages of development where the psychic energy is concentrated, like in the oral phase, it's concentrated in the pleasure you get from eating or putting things in your mouth. You know, babies put pick things up in the mouth. That's the oral phase. And then the anal phase is just learning at the point where you're being toilet trained. So to hold back or to let go, learning what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And if any of the energy is stuck in, say, the oral phase, then you talk a lot, and you eat a lot, and you are addicted to all kinds of things. If it is stuck in the anal phase, you are either your finger tight or untidy. So either you're really, really anally retentive tidy, or you are very, very untidy. Okay, this is according to Freud. Don't ask me how. The phallic phase is where a child is, this is where you get the Oedipus complex, where a child is looking at the opposite sex parent as like in competition with their same-sex parents. So girls like their daddies, boys like their mummies. And you know, the Oedipus complex is where the boy kills his father and marries his mother. Unknowing, it's Greek mythology, but you know, Freud was very learned and brought that into his theory. So at the phallic phase is when you like your opposite sex parent. Okay. And I've forgotten what the fixation there is, but you'll have to read that up yourself. Latency is when you go to school and the sexual energy is now focused on school and making friends and so forth. So you have a reprieve from all this sexual stuff until the genital phase in the teenage years. That's kind of where his theory ends of development. But Erik Erikson takes it through all of the life challenges, and that's a very interesting and easy theory to learn. So Google Erik Erikson, E-R-I-K, Erik. Yes, their age groups. It's like 0 to something, and then 2 to, you have to go and read it. But I don't think that he was stuck on those ages. Psychopathology, though, has no age. It has no age. These are some of the techniques for psychotherapy, for Freud, for psychoanalysis. So free association is where you just let your patient talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. On their couch, of course. And you're sitting right by them, like this, so they can't see your face. And they just talk. And you're just there quietly by. Until they make sense of their own stream of thought. That might be quite helpful. Yeah, if you like that kind of talking. Sorry? Oh yes, psychoanalysts have made a lot of money, especially in New York City. Because it's every day for the rest of your life. 1 hour a day. Insight, I'm sure the newer forms don't go every day, but insight is where, the therapist will help you gain insight into whatever it is that's bothering you, working through stuff. But dream analysis is much more interesting for us Ghanaians. Yes, dream analysis. So you come in, you tell the therapist what you were dreaming about, and they'll say, what did it mean to you? And what was that symbol in there? And there are certain symbols that mean things in psychoanalysis. So they'll help you work through your dreams. And then the analysis of transference. Remember I said that when somebody is liking you too much in therapy or hostile towards you in therapy, it's a transferring of thoughts from the past. Ego defense mechanisms. These are the things which we use to help us deal with the deep anxieties of our past. We talked about repression already. Denial is simply that you You deny that there's a problem. Wife is unhappy. So we have a great relationship. There's nothing wrong in my marriage. You have denied. Reaction formation, projection, sublimation, displacement. These are all kinds of ways in which we protect ourselves from our anxieties. So projection, for example, is, you know, I like you. Then I say, she's the one who likes you. I don't know. I suddenly see that she's eyeing you. Meanwhile, your back is to her. It doesn't make any sense, but I tell everybody that, you know, my sister here likes him. Meanwhile, I'm the one who likes him, because to agree that I like him is too frightening. So it's a reaction formation right there. Yeah, oh sorry, it's a projection right there. Okay, so sublimation is where we have a drive, it's a base drive, but we do something else that is higher. So for example, all of you here wanting to succeed and be family physicians, I would say that you maybe have a drive, a competitive drive in you, and instead of killing each other, you have come to compete here as family therapists, family physicians. Does that make sense? So you compete maybe with your friends or whatever in a much more acceptable way. And society accepts that this is a good way to compete rather than to go and take each other's wives or beat each other up. So Freud would say that's the same motivation that's guiding you. That one is base, but this one is sublime. Do you see? Okay. So there are other Freudian therapists. There are the humanistic approaches. I think I'm almost done. There's interpersonal therapies. And I think I've answered the questions on efficacy. Factors associated with positive outcomes for therapy. The therapeutic relationship, if it's positive, then likely the outcome for psychotherapy will be positive. If our patient thinks it'll be successful, it's likely to be successful. If they think we're wasting their time, doesn't matter how good a therapist you are, nothing is going to happen. Hardly. Providing experience of mastery or control over the problem. So the therapy has to focus on the problem. We can't be doing it like on the side. We have to confront the problem. Otherwise, nothing. Confronting the problem, that's one thing. But helping our patients to feel that they have mastery over the problem by the kinds of techniques we teach, that's important. And then the attribution of success or failure to what they are doing in therapy is important. Poor outcomes associated with the patient has little motivation for change. So I had a patient, when I was a young therapist, he would come in every week on time, and he wouldn't have done anything we had agreed to do. And he was coming on time. He would sit, he would nod, he would agree, we would do this, he would do this, he would come, nothing. So out of frustration one day, I told my supervisor, and he said, okay, ask him why he comes. So I asked him, why do you come? Because you don't do anything we agree you will do. So I was thinking that maybe we should just end therapy. He looked so distressed. He's like, no. I really like coming to therapy. You know, I think it helps me just to sit and talk, even if I won't change anything in my life. And he was much older at the time. He was in his 60s. You know, so I think he just didn't think that he could make any changes in his life, but he liked to come and talk about his problems. So, as a young therapist, I had to endure, you know, until my internship was over, and then I left. I'm sure he came to the next intern and did the same thing too. But anyway, there was little motivation for change, but he found therapy helpful. People with low tolerance of anxiety, that's sometimes you have to remain with the problem, be anxious, and therefore want to change. History of inability to maintain satisfying interpersonal relationships. So if somebody doesn't know how to maintain a relationship, they cannot maintain a therapeutic relationship. So you have to work on the therapeutic relationship, but we don't have that much time in therapy. So then that's difficult. Characteristics of therapist. If the therapist lacks empathy, if the therapist is impatient, sometimes like my good self, you know, I'm very impatient with my patients who are, the ones who are paranoid. So against all evidence to the contrary, they still believe in the things they believe. I believe my wife is cheating on me. And there's no evidence. Wife is 65 years old, you know, hey, who said 65 years old? Thank you. But there's no evidence of cheating. And you know, and they're ruining their family life. It's not their fault. They're paranoid. It's a mental illness. So, but you have to keep reminding yourself that it is a mental illness. That's why they're there. But my patience is like this. So I always refer them. I have a colleague who is a wonderfully patient person. I always refer them to her. That you must know your limitations, or that you are authoritarian and you say, you do this, you do that. That didn't help my old patient who didn't want to change. Didn't matter whether I cajoled, I coaxed, I begged, it didn't happen. He liked the conversation. He had no other people in his life. So it was a contact. Yeah. Okay, interaction or fit between patient and therapist. Sometimes the fit has to be right. If the fit is not correct, you know, you don't like your patient doesn't like you. You are not going anywhere fast. Okay. I think that's it. Okay, so you asked your questions in the beginning. Any question that came to mind? Yes.
I was wondering, because sometimes you need a team approach with people where they have strengths, as opposed to single-handedly sometimes managing some of these patients. Where you had challenges, did you consider a team approach probably? And also, I know sometimes there is some research that combining medication and psychotherapy leads to better outcomes than just using any single one item alone. So in such situations, did you also think about some of these things and any experiences with some of these outcomes when you combine that?
So we're constantly walking between our consulting rooms. We and the psychiatrists and the specialists, we keep constantly walking back and forth. Yeah. So we do consider, in this case, I was a very young therapist. So I would tell my supervisor, and who would do whatever he needed to do. But for the most part now, we do combined treatments. Yeah. So we have patients who don't do well on psychotherapy. they still come, but you can see there's no change. And then you ask, I'd like to refer you for medication, and they'll say no. Or vice versa. They'll be on medication, they would get a step up with therapy, and they'll say no. But for the most part, they do that too. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the lectures. I have a little question about the poor outcome. Looking at all the above, I want to ask, can poor outcome be related to maybe the counselor having very little knowledge about the concept or institution that he or she is trying to maybe help the client on? Like, let's say divorce. Is it possible that probably the counselor is not married and might have not studied anything about content, anything that maybe the client knows or is experiencing, but wants to use the guidance or the steps to help the person out? So can experience or no exposure to that knowledge also contribute to the poor outcome?
Absolutely. So these poor outcome variables assume that you know and you are a competent therapist. But you are right, incompetence is a large part of why therapy fails, or lack of knowledge about a particular problem. Yeah. So if there are other people who know, then you refer them to those specialists. Yeah. There's a last follow-up. Okay.
Prof, I think I have something to say about what she said. For instance, I've never had hypertension before, but I treat the hypertension.
You can do that. You don't have to have the problem to
like
treat
she's
it.
saying, if you are not married, must not necessarily be married.
If you haven't had a divorce,
yes.
Can you not guide somebody through a divorce?
Yes, I think.
Yes, but I think I understood what she was saying more about competence than about your own experience. So, for example, but patients always ask that. So my professor for child psychology, she chose not to have children, but she was really the best child psychologist there was. And so with parents, they would always ask her, Charlotte, do you have any children of your own? And she would say, no, I chose not to. But I know what you're asking. You're wondering if I understand what you're going through. And she would say, I have, this is my life's work. I learned from others. This is what I've been to school in. And I've run countless psychotherapy groups. She would tell them, because what they're really asking you is, are you qualified? And she would go through all her qualifications. But as for the experience, her personal experience, no, she chose not to have that experience, but she chose to work in this. Right. But I took her question about divorce as, if you're going to be a divorce therapist, you have to understand the process, the legal process of divorce, for example, before you understand also the psychological processes that people go through when they are saying they're letting go of a loved one or a not so loved one at the moment, So you have this knowledge that is relevant, not so much the experience, the personal experience of divorce. Yes.
Somebody has a chronic illness, HIV, TB, somebody's at end of life. Are there limitations where you can just decide that, fine, this patient wants to be helped, but it's more medication, it's less psychotherapy, so you withhold that part of your treatment per se? Because you're not really sure if that's what the patient needs.
If you don't think that's what the patient needs, you don't offer it. It's not for everybody. Yeah. And maybe you don't offer it now because they are too physically ill, but say HIV or whatever, they are too physically ill. But they overcome whatever the danger is. And they still have the interpersonal difficulties at home or the mood problems. You have to work on the mood problems. I'll give you an example. I had a patient once who was she was very, very ill physically. And she was also so depressed she didn't want to do anything. Take medication, nothing. Her hair was all over the place. And we just didn't know what to do. We knew we were going to lose her. So I couldn't talk to her because she just wasn't listening. So I braided her hair for her. I sat with her in cardio and braided her hair for her. And then it took a turn. It just changed everything. And so now we could talk. Even though she was so physically ill, we could talk. And slowly she got over it. She's still alive. Still alive. Nice. Yeah, and I what did I write in the, if you go and see the folder, it was braided her hair today. I'm sure that my colleagues were like, this girl is mad.